so today we have Bruce Wiener with Bridge to Justice, and he's here to talk about access to legal representation. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, so what can you tell us about the growing problem of access to affordable legal representation?
Well, that's always been an issue in our country, particularly in civil legal matters where there's no constitutional right to a lawyer, like there is in criminal cases. So in Colorado, about 70% of litigants in domestic relations court, which is what we focus on, don't have a lawyer. My understanding, based on the data that I've seen, is that that's pretty consistent with national trends, and it seems to be increasing, meaning the number of litigants who are representing themselves, meaning pro se litigants, tends to be increasing.
And what's the impact of that on people in the community?
It leads to a number of negative outcomes. Probably the biggest outcome is that litigants who are representing themselves don't understand procedurally what the rules are, so they're not presenting their case in an effective way, and they also don't understand what the substantive laws are. So it can lead to really bad outcomes for litigants, and it also clogs the courts because it takes longer for the courts to process those cases when the judges have to explain what's going on in a particular case.
Right. And you mentioned that this was an issue across the country.
Correct.
So Boulder seems like a very expensive place. Is Boulder or Boulder County impacted more by this issue?
That's a really good question. I think the inequality in Boulder is probably higher than it is in many other parts of Colorado and around the country. The cost of living, it's one of the highest in the country, and so the cost of legal services tends to be higher than in other parts of the country as well. So it's very difficult to afford an attorney in this area.
Right.
In terms of the data, it's pretty consistent as compared to the rest of the state. So it's about 70 to 75% of litigants in family law cases are pro se, and about 63% of litigants on both sides of the case are pro se or self-represented. And that tends to be pretty consistent across the state of Colorado.
And how is Bridge to Justice helping in this area?
So we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We charge substantially reduced rates for low and moderate income clients who qualify based on their income and assets.
Okay.
So right now we're charging a fixed reduced rate of $95 an hour.
Oh, wow.
For any out-of-court time. So that's about a third to a quarter of what market rate attorneys are charging in Boulder. So it's significantly reduced, and therefore it allows more clients or more people to afford our services who otherwise couldn't afford an attorney.
Yeah. And you keep mentioning family law. Is that the focus of Bridge to Justice, or do you have other practice areas, and then why do you choose those practice areas?
Family law is the focus. The reason that we focus on family law is that tends to be the biggest need for civil legal services. Given the fact that the cases tend to drag on, it's very difficult to predict in advance how long the case is going to take, and it's hourly. So it's difficult to do flat fees, contingent fees where you're basing it on a particular outcome is generally not allowed for family law cases.
Right.
And within family law, we focus on the post-divorce or post-decree cases where a party is seeking to modify or enforce an order of the court.
So this could be after they've already been through some court proceeding down the road. If they need additional legal assistance, that's when they might turn more to you.
Exactly. So if something has gone wrong along the way and the parents can't really agree on their own. But then we get involved, and those cases tend to be more difficult than the pre-decree cases.
Okay. And do you work with other organizations in Boulder County that are trying to serve a similar population, or maybe the legal community at all?
We do. We receive a lot of referrals from Boulder County Legal Services, which is the legal aid organization in Boulder County.
Right.
We're on the reduced fee panel list for the Bar Association.
Okay.
And we work with a number of nonprofit agencies that focus on serving victims of domestic violence, for example. So Safe Shelter of St. Vrain Valley, Safe House Progressive Alliance, The Hour Center, we have an office in Longmont that we staff 1 day a week, among others.
Yeah.
But they tend to be nonprofit social service agencies.
Okay. Since your rates are so reduced, and you have, it's not just you, you have 3 attorneys?
Correct.
Staff?
3 attorneys, including myself.
So where do you need more funding besides what the fees you're bringing in, or how do you keep afloat?
So about 75% of our revenue is based on client fees,
Okay.
and the rest comes from grants and donations.
Okay.
So we get grants, typically local grants, so city and county of Boulder, local bar foundations, community foundations, and then we do typically an end-of-year giving campaign through Colorado Gives Day,
Right.
and so those are private, modest donations. But we're always looking to diversify our funding sources.
Mm-hmm.
What's unique about our organization is that we're not dependent on grants.
Mm-hmm.
So if a funding source, let's say, dried up, or if they redirected their funding, we wouldn't have to lay people off,
Right.
which I think makes us very unique.
Right. And do you take steps to keep your overhead low, or how do you manage your costs?
So we don't have a full-time paralegal.
Okay.
So our support staff is pretty lean.
Mm-hmm.
We have a intake specialist who helps us with intake and to schedule appointments. But probably compared to most traditional law firms, our overhead is pretty low. We just moved offices a couple months ago. We're where the Community Foundation is,
Okay.
on the northwest corner of Spruce and Broadway,
Okay.
1123 Spruce Street. So, it's always a balance.
Mm-hmm.
We want to properly compensate our attorneys and make sure that they're well supported and they have what they need. But the flip side of that is that we are a nonprofit and we are always looking to keep our costs low where we can.
Wow. It sounds like you're providing a huge service. How did you get into this line of work?
Well, my route was probably pretty circuitous, I would say. My first job out of law school was working for a corporate law firm
Mm-hmm.
in New York City,
Yeah.
so completely different than what I'm doing now. I moved out to Boulder about 8 years ago, and I started volunteering with legal aid.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first experience doing public interest work, and I really enjoyed it. And I ended up working for an organization that was doing very similar work to Bridge to Justice,
Yeah.
and it was called The Law Shop. And I really enjoyed it and wanted to continue doing it, and it led to this. And we've developed a business model that I think really works, and that's been proven over the last 4 years since we started, and I really enjoy it.
Well, great. So, Bruce, if anyone wanted to reach out either for your help or to support your organization, how can they contact you?
Well, we have a website, www.boulderbridgetojustice.org, that has our telephone number, and we have a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page.
Great. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for talking with us.
Great to see you, Gina.